Hadith plus Sirah equals the Sunnah. This is the way of Muhammad. So you remember, you've got the book of Allah, and you've got the example of Muhammad. So you have the book, and you have the man, which is Muhammad. Muhammad is regarded as the perfect Muslim. He went through different phases in his life. So thus, Islam is thus revealed in stages. First, he was a religious leader, and not a successful religious leader. When he was in Mecca, he was a prophet for about 12 years, according to the Sirah, and he only converted about 70 people in the first 12 years. And he then, once he became a political and military leader, he then was able to raise the funds he needed and raise the army he needed to make Islam successful, which was enforced by the sword. So anyone who wants to be a good Muslim would follow the Sunnah of Muhammad, and this was his progression from peace to violence. Now, if you look at the Bible, it goes from the Old Testament to the New Testament, from more violent to peaceful in the example of Jesus. But if you look at the Quran, it is completely the opposite, from more peaceful to more violent. And what people don't realize is the Quran is not arranged in chronological order. It is arranged by length of chapter. Let us have a look here. We can use the Quran, chapter 434, a very controversial chapter because this discusses the beating of women. Again, another question that comes up and something that causes great controversy. Now, my aim is not to deliberately embarrass people. I simply want to get to the bottom of this and provide the facts. So, Quran 434, as for women of whom you fear rebellion, not women who have rebelled, but fear rebellion, admonish them, remain apart from them in beds, and beat them. Different translations will use the word nudge or other words, but when you take the Arabic text, which is often included within these Qurans, and you paste that into, say, Google Translate, you will get to the word beat. So we can look at things like this. So if we go to Quranex, which claims to be the most complete Quran, Tafsir, and Hadith website in the world, men are in charge of women. The feminists may or may not have something to say about that. Okay, but it says, as for those from whom you fear rebellion, admonish them and scourge them, okay? And finally, strike them, okay? And then beat them. Now, the word lightly here, if you look at this does not appear in the original translation. This was added to soften. Now, we can look here for multiple different translations. So to go back to that, so we can also then get more clarity on this from the Tafsir al-Jalalain. We can look at Tafsir Ibn Kathir and the Tafsir of Maududi. Let's look at Tafsir al-Jalalain. So it says here, men are in charge of women. Okay, they have to keep them in check. Let's see. And those you fear may be rebellious, not women who have rebelled, but those from whom you fear may be disobedient to you. When such signs appear, okay, and strike them. Now it says here, not violently. For us to really determine if this is so, we need to go to the original Arabic translation and check that. But let's go to on women. Okay. Okay. So let's look at the examples. You have the example of Muhammad, which has to be followed. Okay. If we look at, for instance, this is Aisha, Muhammad's wife, whom he married at 6, he consummated at 9, and he says, he struck me on the chest, which caused me pain. So Muhammad hit his own wife. Okay. This is, I can go to the reference here, Hadith collection. Okay, it says here, At-Tabari, another tafsir, Allah permits you to shut them in separate rooms and to beat them. Okay, now it says here, Sahih Bukhari, the most highly regarded hadith collection, the Prophet said, none of you should flog his wife as he flogs a slave and then have sexual intercourse with her in the last part of the day. Okay, this is from the Sharia. Okay, so when you fear rebellion, so dealing with a rebellious wife, you may hit her, okay? There is a stipulation, not in a way that injures her, okay? He may not break her bones, wound her, or hit her in the face, okay? It says here, he may hit her whether she is rebellious only once, but a weaker opinion holds that he may not hit her unless there's repeated rebelliousness. And then, well, it goes on to say, it is not lawful for a wife to leave the house except by the permission of her husband. And if keeping her is ineffectual, it is permissible for him to hit her. His hitting her may not be in a way that injures her. Now, that we can't assume that everyone who interprets the Quran is necessarily a genius or a scholar or knows all of these details, or someone who's angry and is willing to hit women is able to control himself and not hit her in such a way that doesn't break her bones or doesn't hit her in the face.
All right. And yeah, there you go. Thank you. All right, so Albert is really upset in the chat, and he's saying what this guy doesn't know could fill a book. I like you, Jan, but this is a huge distraction from the real enemy. Stop blaming the victims, he says. Is that true? Are they only the victims? Or, I mean, you literally just quoted the Quran in these texts directly, and so why are they saying that they're the victims when all we are doing is literally quoting the text themselves?
One of the confusions and one of the weapons as well used to confuse is to conflate Muslims with Islam. Muslims are people. People have different motivations. People have different levels of knowledge, different levels of commitment, different motivations. Right? Islam is an ideology. This is the ideology. This is the scripture. This is the doctrine. The doctrine is unchanging. The doctrine is eternal. Muslims that don't follow this, well, I think we should be grateful that they don't. Many of them look at this and go, no, this is not for me. Many of them are not aware of this. Many of them reject this.
So because they're not aware of it, they're calling you the ignorant one. Is that basically what we're getting? Okay.
But this is the doctrine. You see, now think about this. Let's say America becomes an Islamic state. This then becomes the law of the land.
Right, exactly. Now, let me ask you this. Anthony asks, what is the most authoritative translation of the Quran in the U.S. market? And I have the Tajweed translation and one other one that I use.
There are numerous ones. Just that some of the newer translations, because of the internet, remember, most of these texts were only translated from 1995 onwards. So they've only been in the world just over 20 years. So what you have is it's only recently that people are starting to actually read these texts and they've just been made available. So the Noble Quran is a very common one. I tend to refer to the Arbery and the Yusuf Ali and various others. I tend to use more than one because I try to, some of them have been rewritten to make them less controversial, less violent, to make them more Western friendly. So I would be very careful. And don't forget, deception of the kafir is legal within Islam. It is allowed.
Whereas Christianity, you are not allowed to lie at all because lies are Satan is the father of all lies.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. It says here in Sunan Abu Dawud, Hadith 2147, the Prophet said, a man will not be asked as to why he beat his wife. I think that's pretty clear. So a man will not be asked as to why he beat his wife. So how do you interpret that? How do you interpret the instruction from Muhammad himself that a man will not be asked why he beat his wife? That does leave license. Now, let's say you have someone who's not very well versed in all of the entire Islamic exegesis and he sees only this hadith. What does he take away from that? And what kind of change does that invoke within a society? Look at this. This is within the Sharia. A people that leave its leadership to a woman will never succeed. Okay? So this is the kind of attitude that is forever enshrined within the Islamic scriptures and thus in the Islamic doctrine. Online, I utilize mostly, not only, but a site called Quranx.com, which is Quranx.com. They claim to be the most complete. And as far as I can tell, they are a very, very thorough website. They have about 19 different translations of the Quran. They have numerous hadith, numerous tafsir, and various other resources. So they are very, very useful. But hopefully that shows you that within the Quran, within the hadith, within the Sharia, and within the tafsir, there are clear indications that it is legal within Islam for a man to beat his wife. That is not within doubt. All of these sources line up.